At its core, the argument we're taking is we have to consider management rights. And I'm going to get into the AL case in a minute to sort of break that down more. But management rights are that section in contracts that give employers the right to impose policies. And there's been all kinds of case law for a very, very long time. I'm just going to show an example. This is the 2006 Supreme Court case that cites 2006. Sorry, that cites somewhere in the 90s. This court has held that employers' management rights are limited not only by the collective agreement, but also by mandatory legislative provisions. In Perry Sound, Iacobucci also recognized that the CBA may give the employer a broad right to manage the operations of the business. However, that power is limited by the employee's statutory rights, even where the CBA is silent on the subject. And they quote Weber for that, which was a case back in the 70s. So it's been well documented for a very long time that you can't just make someone do whatever you want. They later on, this was 2006 and 2013, so that's 7 years later, in Irving, they codified KBP, which was from 1965. There were 6 requirements that had to be met before you could impose a new policy without either union ratification or employee consideration. And the first 2 of those 6 requirements is that the policy must not be consistent with the contract itself, and it must not be unreasonable. And obviously something that is unlawful on its face is de facto unreasonable. And then there's been provincial courts, without naming CVP or KBP, have done the same thing. This is important because if what we're arguing is that a new policy is being unilaterally imposed, the only way they can do that is through management rights. And management rights are very clearly defined, both in contract and in case law, for decades and decades. And this is a unique situation where they want to pretend management rights doesn't exist and just say, no, there's some inherent authority to implement a policy that's totally apart from the contract itself. Right, so here's an example of a particular one. The union, this is from our collective agreement, the union recognizes the exclusive right, that's the management rights, of the company to operate its equipment, machinery, and equipment, and to manage its operations as it sees fit, subject to the restrictions imposed by law or by provisions of the collective agreement. And you'll see.
And also, can we just pause here for a moment, because a collective agreement cannot supersede law. So a collective agreement must follow legislation, and it can't supersede employment laws. It can't supersede law.
Absolutely.
Because that's in a sense of like contracting out law, which you cannot do.
And we actually argue that from the Supreme Court. So back in 2008, these are 2 important cases. During the financial crisis, Parliament passed a law that unilaterally impacted all kinds of collective agreements by doing spending freezes. And these cases were challenged all the way to Supreme Court through multiple provinces. Ontario and BC challenges were the 2 that made the Supreme Court. And in those 2 cases, which we cite, the Supreme Court said, look, we recognize that the policy is being changed in response to legislation and it's being violated, but employers are only doing what they're required by statute to do. So there's your answer, is that when Parliament passes legislation, if that ends up invalidating contracts, Supreme Court made very clear, no, parliamentary authority supersedes the private contract if they don't interfere with each other.
Yeah, and I think that's important, if they don't interfere with each other, right?
And if they do, most nullity. I mean, they have different, called severability clauses often, right? It's a nullity or severability. saying any provision of the agreement which is or which becomes a violation of applicable laws will be null and void.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, you have to enter into bargaining to come to a suitable replacement.
Mm-hmm.
And most contracts have that. So that's your inherent understanding that statutes supersede contracts. And this is even one further
Mm-hmm.
removed. We're
Mm-hmm.
saying that individual employees in HR can implement a policy which violates federal laws. And that's like, can you imagine? I can just write a document saying I have the right to break the law. I have a free pass here, right? I can run around and wherever I want. Because the
Mm-hmm.
document says I can. And that's at a core what really happened during the pandemic.
Yep.
Like in our
Consistently.
conversation,
Consistently.
absolutely. And we need to point that out to people that we had employers across the country who believed they had the right to break the law because they
Mm-hmm.
issued a policy saying they could.
Mm-hmm.
And they expected that to work.
Mm-hmm. 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 Absolutely. And like, in, in reality, it's, looking at business owners, it's those people believed that they were within their right to do what they were doing, and they were, taking it for the team and saving lives, right? And it's
Mhm.
absolutely crazy to see, when you kind of pull yourself out of it and look down at what happened, and to see how the government themselves, I mean, look where we're at right now. I mean, it's even worse now than it was during COVID because it's been allowed to fester, right? It's been allowed to fester. And the entire judicial system needs a shakeup and a shakedown and whatever. And you guys all know what happened with the Romlewski case, which was denied. And this is kind of a perfect example of where we as Canadians, number one, need to educate ourselves to what the proper system should be, and understand who these people should be. And exactly, observer, he should have recused himself from that case,
Oh,
and the lawyers involved, because while Romlewski was self-represented, he had lawyers behind him helping him to write his documents, because it's very difficult at that level of the court. But these are the people, I think all of the federal court judges at this point were appointed during the liberal terror reign. So, and I Matthew, you got work ahead of you, but goodness, my goodness, at the very least, out of all of this, the truth has been revealed. The truth is staring us in the face, and it's not gossip. It's not jibby jab talking. It's here. It is. Here it is. So again, Matthew, kudos to you for all of this work. Um, Amazing. And also heartbreaking. Like, it is very frustrating to
yeah,
to
it's
see
thousands
that.
of lives being
Yeah.
destroyed.
Yeah. And I'm just going to be real with you guys for a moment. I haven't worked in a very long time. I used to have a pretty good job, and I saw some. I actually went to a get together last night with people I worked with 20 years ago, and there's a lot of us that are in the same situation as me, and I realized today that if it wasn't for the fact that I have my husband to help carry me, if I was by myself, I don't know where I would be right now. And to think of all those people, they their lives were ripped out from under them in what, a year, right? and
Yeah.
and then there was what was supposed to be due process and rule of law to protect them was also taken from them. And I know people that are still dealing with the fallout, that lost their jobs, and now their lives have been completely altered. And it's not just like unfair and unjust. It's fucking evil. It's evil. is what it is.
Yeah, it's war games.
It
I
is.
mean, the people who haven't watched last week, I encourage you to. When you look at the combination of things like templates that had
Mhm.
to proof text individual partial sentences from prior cases, and then you had to construct a test that was modified for COVID, and to stick all this in templates, which are just thrown into hundreds of cases. There's a huge amount of coordination across multiple
Yeah.
agencies. This is a plan. This
Hmm.
doesn't happen by accident. And you
Nope.
can't implement a plan this quickly, just flying off the seat of your pants. Just
No, this is, I mean, all of this was, as we know, very well orchestrated, planned for a very long time. This was not something that was like, hey, let's just do this. I'm putting the link to the previous Rumble so you guys uh, can watch. I mean, Goko says that was quite the time, 2020 to 2021, very stressful. I mean, I don't feel the stress is left because I mean, I'm living in Toronto and I'm watching systematically as they're destroying the city and impacting businesses. They, I mean, it hasn't gone away. It's just shifted, I think. And it's really crazy to see that COVID was the tool and the mechanism, like the process for shaping people's mindset, locking them down, scaring the shit out of them, traumatizing them, but then changing the social behavior, changing the world, and then just opening it back up to this new thing and people not seeing that it's completely different. And for those of us who are, those of us that see, it's still there because every day you watch little by little as they're implementing these things that are leading to the end goal. And so for me, it's not gone. It's still there,
mhm.
you know? And Matthew, you are, I would say guided by angels, you have done so much work and it's really opened my eyes. Even though even though I know, it still blows my mind to see at the lengths that they went to make this happen. And the part that pisses me off the most, and I really hope that through this exercise, you are going to get to the KPMG nonsense, because this is what bothers me is so again, my background, right? I've worked in ad agencies and doing strategy and putting together. No, it wasn't for government; it was for products. But in my head, when you shared with me about the KPMG, I can picture. Oh, we got this great contract, everybody! Yay! Okay, we got to make this strategy. Okay, we got to read this, learn this, and we got to like the work, the absolute amount of effort that would have gone into these outputs from KPMG and the
Yeah,
money that went into producing it because they, they didn't want to be part of it. They wanted to outsource it because there's a lot of,
of course.
yeah.
Plausible
And
deniability. The experts told us to do it.
exactly. And that's the part I think in all of this that actually pisses me off the most is these NGOs that are participating in the demise of Canada itself. And yeah,